Whoever you are on the consumer side, like that's still you with your business hat on. And so those worlds have converged together. The buyer on the business side more and more doesn't want to have that archaic experience of, friction in getting what they want. They just want it now. And that is the itch that PLG helps solve.
Hey everyone, welcome to the GTM News Show. Thanks for listening. I got a special guest here today, Julia. Hey Julia.
Hey Taylor, how are you?
Doing well. Thanks for joining the show. The reason why I wanted to bring Julia on was she actually taught a course on product-led growth in a community we're both in, Pavilion, and I learned a lot from it. So I was like, let's bring her on the show because I think PLG, product-led growth, is still, we were just talking before I hit record about how a lot of folks still are unfamiliar with it and it's still gaining popularity, and it's something that is really exciting, especially in the B2B world, SaaS world, etc., for creating more frictionless experiences and ultimately making better customer experiences. I'm going to throw out a stat that I read last year to kind of get the conversation going, and we can dive right in, Julia. But a stat that came out, and oh my gosh, the folks that came out with it. I'll bring up the organization that brought the stat, but essentially what it came out was that 20 to 25% of B2B buyers are willing to spend up to $1 million through an e-commerce experience. And McKinsey, that's the organization that came out with the study last year. Just a small name, easy to forget.
Company.
Yeah, easy to forget. McKinsey came out with this study that basically they wanted to check out about e-commerce experiences, right? Frictionless experiences where people would buy something online without talking to a sales rep, right? And so their study produced that 1 in 5 folks would spend up to $1 million buying something online without, interacting with any sort of sales rep. And so this is part of PLG, and part of product-led growth. That's kind of wanted to frame the conversation. And Julia, to jump right in, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you define product-led growth? What is it?
It's first of all, it's an overloaded term is what it has become. Mm-hmm. I think there's a few years ago, it was kind of booming in popularity. And I'll define it in a moment, but I'll just kind of say, and then we kind of hit, I think, a few snags as the market crashed a little bit. And I can also talk through why that happened. And it almost felt a little bit, for a moment there, like the thing you don't say, almost like, persona non grata almost. And now it feels like it's coming back, which has been fascinating to watch. But, PLG, product-led growth, essentially is a distribution strategy. If you think about it, if you get right down to it. So the idea of building product from the beginning in a way where the product is going to provide that value and provide that explanation for why somebody would want to use it and be the source of what makes other people want to use it. So on the consumer side, we've seen this for quite some time. Think Dropbox, right? You use, years ago, obviously, you use it, you store some of your documents there, and then you share that with someone else, and someone else is like, hey, this is cool. What's Dropbox? Boom, they're signing up, right? Frictionless experience. You don't have to talk to somebody else. You just sign up. So the product is growing itself. I'm sure the product folks are going to love that. But yeah, in essence, in a quick summary, that is what it is.
I love it, Julia. That's helpful. And I actually really appreciate how you mentioned the snowball effect. And I think Dropbox is a great example of that, where you go sign up, you store documents, you share it with other people, and then those people sign up for a Dropbox account, and it creates this virality, right, where it's a snowball effect of any other additional thoughts on that, of it creating not only a frictionless experience for the first user, but then that snowball effect moving forward from there.
Yeah. And, there are so many intricacies there and so many other things to kind of dig into, especially from kind of a product standpoint and a growth standpoint. But high level wise, the idea is ease of use and value that is provided. And then that virality kind of standpoint of built into the product, some capability of discoverability, so that it can keep on moving amongst the market to more users. That all of that kind of bundled together. PLG.
Love it. You also piqued my interest too on kind of the history. You mentioned we've kind of gone through some seasons of PLG. Tell me about those. I'd love to hear share some history with the audience. And then why now? Why, July, August of 2023?
Yeah. In some ways, July 2023, I mean, for this has been something that's been around for a while. It certainly isn't new now, but I think it's just become mainstream, so to speak. So history wise, going back, and I think we covered this in the class as well, but just kind of high level ideas. If you think of business products, you think of what was it like to buy software decades ago, right? And decades ago, it was a traveling salesman getting together, lunches, right? It's here. Let us sell you the dream of this software that then you buy for massive amounts of money, that takes a year to implement, to kind of roll out, right? And then you walk through the rest of our timeline, and the cloud happened, right? And all of a sudden it was like, well, now you don't necessarily need a year to implement. Maybe now, you get to see it. You still need your enterprise kind of rollout. So maybe there's some implementation there, but the more the cloud took on and the more it got adopted by, some of those Fortune 500, 150 companies, the closer and closer we got where everything on the business side became more instant gratification as well. Now it's like the buyer can go at 3 a.m. and check something out. They're up, they're stressing, they're planning, they're whatever it is that they're doing. And they're like, I want this and I want this now. And that is the world in which also on the flip side, on the consumer side, we have all moved to. You lie in bed, you can order your Amazon right there instantly, read your reviews and order it. You've used whatever it is that you are using, whether it's Spotify, whether like all of your apps on the consumer side, we have gotten used to. You can just get it now. Well, guess what? Whoever you are on the consumer side, like that's still you with your business hat on. And so those worlds have converged together. The buyer on the business side more and more doesn't want to have that archaic experience of, friction in getting what they want. They just want it now. And that is the itch that PLG helps solve. It's like, I can put a solution in your hands right now. Okay, thanks.
I love it. And I think the instant gratification is, so potent in our society. I always look at my nieces and nephews. I don't have any kids myself, but I always look at my nieces and nephews and hear how they talk about like Amazon or whatnot. And just the other day, my 6-year-old niece, Maggie, was like, oh, we ordered these shoes and not going to be here for 2 days. And she was just going on and on and on about how I have to wait 2 whole days. And then my nephew, Jack, last year, I remember like walks into the room and he has his parents' iPhone on and he's like, oh man, Amazon is 11 stops away. And he's like frustrated because he's like waiting. He's like literally tracking the stops. And I'm like, and it's these epiphanies. I'm like, our society has just changed so much, obviously from 10 or 15 years ago. And I think it's, the essence of PLG or product-led growth is meeting, really, like you mentioned, the demands of the market of like, hey, we want things faster. And then also with how competitive the environments are, right? There's, especially in the B2B world, with globalization, if you're on the service side, people can service people all around the world now. So you're competing on this global remote scale. On the software side, 100,000 SaaS platforms, right? And counting. everyone is now competing for this market share. And so any thoughts on that from like having a competitive advantage if you can implement some PLG motions in your works where maybe your competitors aren't doing that? Any thoughts there?
What a fascinating point, Taylor. Like everything in life, it's truly a trade-off, right? If you're early stage, or if you're at a point where you've hit certain humps in scalability in the product, or in its distribution, right? I think there's some really important questions you can ask to be able to say, can we actually improve drastically our market share or our growth at this point by considering a PLG motion? And I'll say first, the trade-offs of implementing it is PLG will not give you immediate results. If you're wanting immediate wins, that's harder, right? You've got to nail that product experience. You've got to nail that ease of use, that initial value up front, right? And then throw in a piece that actually works there around some sort of, maybe not virality completely in your first go, but it is hard, right? Nailing that value plus that retention of the product, because also absolutely pointless to have a PLG kind of motion or to be able to get customers into or users into your product that then don't stay for whatever reason and leave, right? Like leaky bucket is the worst thing that you could have. So there is some investment there in being all in and understanding that your initial goals with PLG aren't actually necessarily just growth, right? Like you've got to nail that retention. And I've seen founders make that mistake in the past, just, indications of, hey, this product, we're onto something. Everybody we talk to says they love this idea. And now we have this product and they're coming, they're signing up and they're trying and they're like, pedal to the metal. Let's go all out. Let's sell this thing. Let's market the heck out of this thing. Right. And I think that's a typical desire. Right. And it's hard to hold yourself back, but you have to ensure you don't have a leaky bucket. Otherwise, what's the point? So it's understanding and being ready to commit to that trade-off, that you have to be honest with yourself about certain metrics for PLG, and it might be a little bit scary for some time just to make sure that you get there. But the flip side, the pros there are incredible. You nail that. And now for every one user you get on, you might have 5, right? Because they've spread, or 10. Now the whole, that word of mouth also comes into play with PLG. Somebody loves your product. They're going to tell 10 other people about it. They're going to on their own shout it from the social rooftops. So it's those trade-offs, but going back I kind of took us down a rabbit hole there, going back to how do you know, right? Like what are some of those signals? So, I'd say, who are your users versus your buyers, right? What are you trying to, which orgs or which kind of, what's your market that you're trying to penetrate? Absolutely stereotypical kind of devs, right? So dev tool is a large part in the background I come from. I was a developer myself, helped scale multiple companies that are in the dev tool space, partially thanks to that understanding of, hey, I am a developer, so I know how to market or sell to myself, which, by the way, is don't market, don't sell. That's a whole other conversation. But if your end user is like a developer, right, that's a great, yes, this is what you should do with your tool. If you are in a highly regulated industry, if your end user is someone from healthcare, maybe at that point, that will be hard to set up and to truly give them value without having access to all the things they would need to grant you access, which is unlikely to happen on a user to user to user basis. So those are kind of some things to think about. And interestingly, and now we get into this, product-led sales, kind of area, which is, a lot of people think, it's either PLG, so it's either product-led growth, and therefore I'm allergic to sales, right? Or we're like sales-led, and that's it. And that's really not the right way of thinking about it, and nor is it the way that most large companies think about it. Something like 96% of PLG companies have a sales team. They may introduce it at a little bit later point just to nail that growth component that I talked about, nail that retention component in their product. But at some point, you will be marrying, and you should be marrying, enterprise or, upmarket within your user base. And there are different ways you can use that, right? But at the end of the day, it is always going to help you to have your users get to value quickly, love your product, and use them. And then you can use that to kind of build your larger case for an enterprise deal, which essentially that's PLS right there.
I love it. Super cool. And I think something you mentioned earlier, I've never thought about, and maybe I wasn't listening well enough in your class, but there's, I'm sure you mentioned it, but this difference between decision makers and users when it comes to PLG, and how so much of like a sales-led organization is probably focused on decision makers, right? And I always, I think Chuck Miller, I learned this concept of like above the line versus below the line buyers, right? Above the line are the people writing the checks that care about the ROI. They're the decision maker. Below the line are the users, the people that actually have to use the product, et cetera. And how it's a different mindset shift, right? Where it's like, if you're users, you're almost building the product for them, but they have certain constraints, right? They're not going to be able to either get you the data or maybe expand it across the organization or whatever, right? There's all these different implications, and it's a completely different way of first creating your sales process or your digital sales process, your e-commerce sales process. Is a different version of doing that. And then you're also having to give them value, and you're gonna have different constraints. Super interesting. I'd love for you to dive a little bit deeper into, kind of you mentioned, obviously the sales-led organizations and how they're not the antithesis of each other, right? PLG and sales-led, they can be super complementary. Tell me about maybe if an organization is like 100% sales-led right now, what advice would you have for them when it comes to either, moving their product over into it, or thinking about how to move their product or move their go-to-market motion into PLG?
Yeah. Oh, what a fascinating topic. So I like to think of it as like everything else in life, balance is the answer, right? Some sort of a balance. And so the way that I think about it is, look, a salesperson in a sales-led org, or even a sales leader in a sales-led org, cannot decide on their own little island, hey, we want to have a PLG offering in our company, right? Like that is part of product. Product would have to. So PLG is just, it is completely leadership based. Like everyone has to be bought in for it to be fully PLG company, right? And that's the case and everyone has to be bought in for it to be kind of sales led, right? The reality is you're not going to get anything done as a leader on your own island, but you can absolutely take certain kind of pillars or values from PLG, for example, right? So one typical way that I think people have been doing for a long time in sales-led companies without really realizing that they have a PLG component is offer POCs, proof of concepts. So there is, a pretty known approach in the enterprise world of offering some sort of a POC to their customers prior to buying a larger purchase. And that essentially is a mini PLG motion that's incredibly managed, right? Step by step. If you're doing that right, that is your biggest tool set, is how you're gonna run that motion. And running that process is essentially a PLG offering, right? You're like, that is your little mini product that you're providing as a service. and optimizing it for value in such a way that someone's going to want to say, yes, I'm seeing incredible value here. I want to sign on for this larger dream that you are selling me. So that is one of the biggest pillars of PLG is value, leading with value. Whether you provide that in a proof of concept, way, whether you provide that in a different way, I think, sales overall, and a lot of sellers out there, very vocal, have been saying this for a while too, but it's just this like era of old car salesmen kind of push something on you that you don't need. We're pretty past that, I think, collectively is I'm happy to say. Really the best sellers at this point are the ones who truly care about providing value and selling what they're selling that provides value. And they're not going to want to try to sell in every conversation. It's more around, hey, let me get you there. Let me share this, every email that says not just following up. What do you think? Instead, if it's like, hey, check out this, market research that Gartner just released that is on point around the 37% of companies who are actually first experiencing the same thing that you are, like, you're not alone, for example, right? So like anything that's providing value, that's a pillar from PLG. So that's what you do is you take from the pillars and you incorporate it how you can.
I love it. I think we just came up with a new term, or maybe I just did, value-led growth. And because I think this is like, it's encompassing, even what you said earlier, right? Don't sell, don't market. And I think the best marketing, the best selling is not promoting a product, but actually just helping people solve a problem, right? And without any unconditional, a selfless act of helping people solve a problem, you build rapport, you build trust, then you eventually build that relationship, right? And then they come back to you and want to solve more problems, right? Because you've helped them solve something. And I think I love that expansion of product-led growth into sales and marketing in the sense of how do we just serve people, provide value ahead of time. And then when you mentioned the proof of concept, I think it's an awesome way folks that are, a purely sales-led organization that requires salespeople and a sales process, proof of concept or like a pilot program or something like that. Just get them in the door, right? Get them. I think that's the hardest part of growth is just building that, getting started, right? And getting them to choose you and getting them to at least move forward. And then providing that time to value ratio, reducing that as fast as possible, or as much as possible, getting them some value, whether it's through marketing, sales, and then hopefully your product, right? And I love that. Any other thoughts you have on sales-led organizations that can ultimately provide value, whether it's proof of concept or integrate some of these PLG-ish concepts?
Yeah, that value, like you mentioned, the experience, right? So that's a huge part of product-led growth, right? I think at the root of it is removing frustration and feeling known. You are somewhere, right? You land on a site. I don't know, Asana, old school, right? But a great example of something we all used a while back, and I think a lot of people still do. It's like a kind of not a new example, but as something pretty ingrained in all of us. And it was so simple to get started. It was like, I have a task list, and every company that I would go to, it doesn't even matter if I would just kick off. There's an Asana now that we're going to work on, right? And it was just like feeling known. Like I know I have certain things. I have a certain problem. I know I have certain ways that I want to reflect that and see that visually. And it was just feeling like they know exactly how I want it to appear, right? So feeling known and removing friction. I don't want to have to click in a bunch of different ways. I don't want to give you my phone number. If you in this day and age are still pulling for phone numbers, like marketers out there, if you're like having ebooks behind some sort of a wall, email wall, or however it is. Shout out to Elena Verna for this, for calling this one out, but completely agreed. If you are still asking for phone numbers, When was the last time you got a real phone number? When was the last time that you got a real phone number and the person wasn't annoyed when you called them? Like, let's just, it's 2023. Come on, people. Put yourself in the other person's shoes, right? I think you mentioned in another one of your past recordings, kind of, right? The golden rule. And I don't forget what that's like. You're creating these flows for your customer, your potential customer, your prospect out there. Who are they? They are people like you. Whatever annoys you, chances are it probably annoys them too. Don't do it.
I love it, Julia. I think that's a good note to end on. We've covered a lot. Time has flown. Our time's up here. And a lot to think about. I think this is, I've learned a couple additional things, and I know the audience will too. How can folks connect with you online and keep in touch with what you're up to?
Yeah, thanks. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Julia Gilinets. Would love to hear what you thought. And if I could help in any way, let me know.
Perfect. I'll put those in the show notes as well. Thanks, Julia, again for coming on. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next week.